He came in before dawn, always before the recruits, pushed a mop across the weight room floor like he'd done it 1,000 times. Hood up, eyes low. No one paid attention to him. Until one morning, a young SEAL candidate bent to tie his shoe and froze. Just behind the man's ear, under the edge of a faded collar, was a tattoo. An old mark, nearly washed out. The kind only one group of men ever earned. And only after surviving something no one talked about. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of silence, invisible service, and forgotten legends, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These voices matter. Voiceover script The Gym. Janitor STOR Marcus Mac Sullivan, Navy. SEAL Team 6 founding member Angel Isage. ONLY, ready for recording Section 1. Opening hook, 0 o'clock to 0:45. He came in before dawn. Always before the recruits. Pushed a mop across the weight room floor like he'd done it 1,000 times. Hood up, eyes low. No one paid attention to him. Until one morning, a young SEAL candidate bent to tie his shoe and froze. Just behind the man's ear, under the edge of a faded collar, was a tattoo. An old mark, nearly washed out. The kind only one group of men ever earned. And only after surviving something no one talked about. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of silence, invisible service, and forgotten legends, tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These voices matter. Section 2. The Invisible Man, 0:45 to 4 o'clock. The SEAL compound gym in Virginia Beach wasn't like a normal gym. It wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It was sacred. Every man who stepped through its doors knew that iron meant pain, and pain was the currency of transformation. Grunts, plates, and discipline filled the air. Candidates ran through circuits until their hands bled, and instructors pushed them harder than most human minds could comprehend. And yet, every day before the sound of chalk and steel took over, there he was, mopping, sweeping, restocking, disappearing, no one knew his name. On the duty roster, he was just listed as maintenance civilian contractor. He wore the same uniform every day. Gray coveralls, dark blue hoodie, scuffed work boots that never quite lost the reddish dust from somewhere out west. He showed up every morning at 4:30 a.m. sharp, always before the instructors, always before the recruits. No one ever saw him arrive. He was just there, emptying bins, wiping sweat off mats that weren't his, cleaning mirrors no one thanked him for. He never spoke unless spoken to. And even then, he kept it brief. Morning, copy, all yours. Most of the younger guys didn't even look at him. They were too focused on surviving the day. But some of the older instructors had noticed a few strange things. The way he folded towels, precise, tight. The way he stacked plates, always balanced by weight, not just size. The way he watched the new guys in the mirror, never staring, just observing. Like he was scanning. He didn't wear headphones, never had a phone on him. And though he moved like a man with age in his back, there was something off. His knees didn't crack when he crouched. His hands didn't shake. And when he picked up a 45-pound bar to move it from one rack to another, he did it with a grip that hadn't softened in decades. Recruits joked once that he was probably some burnout or reject. One even whispered that he applied years ago and washed out. But one of the older instructors, a former team leader named Mason, had shut that down with a glance. Mason was tough, quiet, not prone to nonsense. But even he didn't look the janitor in the eye when he passed. The base had seen hundreds of civilians over the years. Kitchen staff, drivers, contractors. But most couldn't handle the environment. The hours were brutal. The security intrusive dot except him. He never complained. Never took a day off. Never got in anyone's way. The only detail anyone ever remembered was this: he always kept the hood up, even indoors, even in July. It was a Tuesday morning in late September. The air outside carried the first hint of fall, crisp and clean dot inside the gym. Candidates were finishing their pre-dawn weight circuit. Sweat dripped. Chalk dust hung in the air. The sound of metal on metal echoed off concrete walls. The janitor, Mac, though no one called him that, was mopping near the squat racks. His hood was up, as always. His head down, moving with the same slow, methodical rhythm he always had. A young SEAL candidate named Ethan Cross had just finished his last set of deadlifts. 23 years old. Third week of advanced training. He was gassed. Hands raw. Legs shaking. He walked over to the water fountain, took a long drink, then bent down to tie his boot. That's when he saw Dot Mac was bent over, wringing out his mop into a yellow bucket. His hood had shifted slightly to the left. Just enough dot behind his right ear, barely visible under the edge of his collar, was a tattoo. Ethan froze. Dot. It wasn't big. Maybe 2.5 inches. Faded black ink. Old. The lines were crude. Not clean like modern tattoos, but the image was unmistakable. SEAL Trident, piercing through a skull. Ethan blinked, stared, looked again. That wasn't a tattoo you got at a shop. That wasn't something you bought. That was earned. And only one kind of man had that ink. The kind who operated in places that didn't exist on maps. The kind who didn't talk about what they'd done. The kind who disappeared into legend. Mac straightened, adjusted his hood, and went back to mopping. He never looked at Ethan, but Ethan couldn't look away. What Ethan didn't know was that he'd just seen something almost no one alive had ever seen. Ethan stood there for a full 30 seconds, boot still untied, staring at the back of the janitor's head. Finally, he walked over. "Excuse me, sir." Mac didn't turn, just kept mopping. "Sir?" Ethan tried again. Quieter this time. Dot paused, set the mop against the wall, turned slowly. His face was weathered, deep lines around the eyes, a scar across his left cheekbone, gray stubble, eyes that didn't give anything away. "Yeah?" Ethan hesitated. He didn't know how to ask. "That ink on your neck," Ethan said carefully. That's a trident, isn't it?" Mac's expression didn't change. He just looked at Ethan for a long moment. Then, "You should get back to training." But training. Mac's voice was calm, firm, final. Ethan swallowed, nodded, walked away, but he couldn't let it go. That night, back in the barracks, Ethan pulled out his phone. He searched SEAL Trident skull tattoo meaning. Most results were generic. Biker ink, fake tough guy stuff. But then he found a forum. A private veteran board. The kind you needed verification to join. One post, buried deep, from 2008. If you see a trident piercing a skull, faded ink, Vietnam or Cold War era style, that's old Team 6. Original Dev Gru. The guys who were there when it was founded. They don't talk. They don't brag. And if you know what that ink means, you don't ask. Ethan's heart pounded. He searched again. SEAL Team 6 founding members. 1981. Most records were redacted. Names blacked out. Dates wrong on purpose. But there was one declassified summary from 1997. Dev Gru, known publicly as SEAL Team 6, was established in 1980 under the command of C.D.R. Richard Marcinko. Original members were hand-selected from existing SEAL teams. Most names remain classified. Operations include Grenada, Panama, Gulf War, and numerous black site missions across 3 decades. Ethan stared at his screen. The janitor got the man who mopped floors, who emptied trash, cans. Who never spoke. He was one of them. But Ethan couldn't look away, and no one knew. The next morning, Ethan couldn't focus. During PT, he kept glancing at Mac, who was restocking towels in the corner. During the tactical brief, he barely heard the instructor. After lunch, he found Mason, the senior instructor, sitting alone in the equipment cage. "Chief," Ethan said quietly. Mason looked up from his clipboard. "Cross, can I ask you something?" Mason set the clipboard down. "About?" "The janitor." Mason's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "What about him?" "I saw his tattoo." "On his neck." Mason was quiet for a long time. And, is he? Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. Mason stood up, walked to the door, looked out at the gym. Mac was mopping again, hood up, invisible. "You want to know who he is?" Mason asked, voice low. "Yes, Chief." Mason turned back to Ethan. "Then you don't ask him. You don't bother him. You don't tell anyone what you saw. Because if he wanted you to know, he would have told you." Ethan nodded slowly. "But I'll tell you this," Mason continued. "That man has forgotten more about being an operator than you'll ever learn. He was doing this job when most of us weren't even born. And the reason he's here, cleaning floors? It's because this is where he wants to be. Close to the work. Close to the next generation. Watching. Making sure we don't forget." Mason stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "His name is Marcus Sullivan. We call him Mac. He was one of the originals. 1981. Grenada, Panama. Black Ops you'll never read about. He's saved more lives than you've got fingers and toes. And he's never once asked for credit." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "So when you see him tomorrow," Mason said, "you nod. You respect the silence. And you train harder. Because he's watching. And if you're good enough, maybe one day you'll understand why he never left." 3 days later, everything changed. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Candidates were running through a combat fitness test. One of them, a kid named Ramirez, was doing rope climbs. He was gassed, hands slipping, 20 feet up. Then his grip failed. He fell. Fast, people shouted. Instructors ran, but Mac was closer. He dropped the mop. And moved. Not like a 68-year-old. Janitor. Like an operator. He covered 15 feet in 2 seconds. Positioned himself under the fall line. Caught Ramirez midair with a perfect fireman's carry absorption technique. The impact should have crushed him. It didn't. Mac's knees bent. His core engaged. Weight distributed perfectly. He set Ramirez down gently. "You good?" Mac asked, voice calm. Ramirez, shaking, nodded. Yeah, I think so. Get it checked anyway." Mac stood, brushed off his coveralls, and walked back to his mop. Like nothing had happened. But everyone had seen it. The speed, the precision, the technique, that wasn't luck. That was training, decades of training. And now they couldn't unsee it. By dinner. Word had spread. Not officially, but in whispers. "Did you see the janitor catch Ramirez? Moved like a cat. That wasn't normal." Ethan sat with 3 other candidates in the chow hall. One of them, a guy named Torres, leaned in. "I'm telling you, man, that dude's not just a janitor." Another candidate, Lopez, shook his head. "Come on. He's like 70. 70-year-olds don't move like that." Torres shot back. Ethan stayed quiet. Torres turned to him. "Cross, you've been here longer. You know anything? Ethan thought about what Mason had said. Don't tell anyone what you saw. But now everyone had seen it. I think, Ethan said carefully, he's exactly where he's supposed to be. That night, Mason called an unscheduled meeting in the briefing room. All candidates, all instructors. The room was packed. Mason stood at the front, arms crossed. Most of you saw what happened today, he began. Some of you are asking questions, so I'm going to answer them. Once, he paused. The man you know as the janitor is Marcus Sullivan. Call sign, Mac. He's 68 years old. He's been working here for 12 years. And before that, he spent 19 years as a SEAL. Most of that time with Dev Grew. The room went silent. He was one of the founding members of Team 6, Mason continued. Selected personally by Richard Marcinko in 1981. He operated in Grenada, Panama, the Gulf, and places that still don't have names. He's been shot 4 times, survived an RPG blast, and pulled more men out of bad situations than anyone in this room will ever know. Someone in the back raised a hand. Why is he a janitor? Mason's jaw tightened. Because after he retired, he couldn't stay away. The work mattered to him. The men mattered. So he came back. Not as an instructor. Not as a consultant. As support staff. Because that's what was available. And because he doesn't need a title to serve. The room was still. So here's what you're going to do, Mason said, voice firm. You're going to treat him with respect. You're not going to ask him for stories. You're not going to bother him. And when you walk past him tomorrow morning, you're going to remember that he's done more for this country than most of us combined. He looked around the room, dismissed. The next morning, something was different. Mac arrived at 4:30 a.m. Like always, he pushed his mop cart through the gym entrance. But this time, people were already there. Waiting. 20 candidates. 5 instructors, standing in formation. Silent. Mac stopped. He looked at them. Then Mason stepped forward. Morning, Mac. Mac nodded. Chief, we wanted to say something, Mason said. On behalf of everyone here, thank you for everything you've done, for still being here, for showing us what service really looks like. Mac's expression didn't change, but his eyes softened. You don't owe me anything, Mac said quietly. Yes, sir. We do. Then, one by one, every man in that gym stood at attention and saluted Marcus Sullivan. Mac stood there for a long moment. Then, slowly, he straightened his back, pulled his shoulders square, and returned the salute, not as a janitor, but as what he'd always been. An operator, a warrior, a SEAL. But the story wasn't over. Later that day, someone took a photo. It wasn't planned, it wasn't staged, it was just a moment. Mac, in his gray coveralls and blue hoodie, standing in front of the SEAL Trident, painted on the gym wall. Arms at his sides, hood down. For once, expression calm, dignified, unbreakable. The photo was posted to a private SEAL veteran group on Facebook. No caption. Just the image. Within 2 hours, it had 5,000 reactions. By the next day, it was everywhere. Veteran forums, Reddit, Twitter. People who'd served with Mac started commenting. That's Mac Sullivan. Pulled me out of a hot LZ in '89. Never said a word about it. I trained under him in '94. Best operator I ever saw. Didn't know he was still around. He saved my brother's life in Panama. We owe him everything. The headline on a military news site read, Original SEAL Team 6 member spent 12 years as gym janitor, and no one knew. Mac never gave an interview, never made a statement. He just kept showing up. Same time. Same uniform. Same work. But something had changed. The candidates. no longer walked past him without looking. They nodded quietly, respectfully. 6 months later, something beautiful happened. A young candidate named Miller was struggling. Third week. Couldn't get his swim times down. Couldn't finish the O course. He was about to quit. One morning, at 5 a.m., he was sitting alone in the locker room, head in his hands. Mac walked in with his supply cart. Saw him. Paused. Then walked over and sat down next to him. Didn't say anything. Just sat. After a minute, Miller looked up. "I don't think I can do this," Miller said quietly. Mac was quiet for a long time. Then, "You know how many times I thought that?" Miller blinked. "Every day," Mac said. "For 19 years. Every single day, I thought maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I didn't belong. Maybe I should quit. But you didn't," Miller said. "No, because I realized something." "What?" Mac looked at him. "It's not about being the best. It's about not quitting. That's it. That's the whole job. Show up, do the work. Don't quit." He stood up. "You'll figure out the swim times. You'll finish the course. But only if you're still here tomorrow." Then he walked away. Miller sat there for a long moment. Then he stood up, laced his boots, and went back to training. 3 months later, Miller graduated, top of his class. Marcus Mack. Sullivan never stopped being a janitor. He never asked for recognition, never wanted a ceremony. He just showed up. Every morning, 4:30 a.m., same uniform. Same work. Because for Mac, it wasn't about glory. It was about the mission, and the mission never ended. It just changed form. From kicking down doors in Panama. To mopping floors in Virginia. From saving lives under fire. To saving careers. With a few quiet words. Some men measure their legacy in medals. Mac measured his in the men who didn't quit. And on quiet mornings, when the gym was still dark and the recruits hadn't yet arrived, Mac would stand in front of the Trident on the wall, hood down, shoulders back, and he'd whisper the words he'd said every day for 40 years. "Ready?" Because Marcus Sullivan never stopped being a SEAL. He just stopped wearing the uniform. So now I ask you, have you ever met someone like Mac Sullivan? Someone who served in silence, who never asked for applause, who traded glory for purpose and never looked back? Say their name in the comments. Share their story. Let others know that the most powerful warriors don't always wear medals. Sometimes they wear coveralls. Because here at the Human Stories, we believe the greatest service is the kind no one sees until someone finally looks. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor the silent warriors who never stop serving. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, if you ever see a janitor mopping floors at dawn, watch their hands. You might be standing next to a legend.